one quick point, two quick points, and then I want to talk about the actual writing. First, you say that he was a humble man, among other things. I couldn't care less. He's pretty long dead. He may have written this stuff, he may not have, probably from his students who were writing about him, and his students are going to have a much different attitude towards him than an average group. They're going to respect him way more than most people on the street. Even so, I couldn't care less. He could be a monster. Doesn't matter to me in the slightest. All we have, all I care about, is this, the writing. Now, you're saying the translation is a little problematic here and there. And that, I can't do anything about. I have heard this before. Everybody's going to have a different feel for it. My guess is, eventually new translations will come out, and sooner or later, the natural evolution of these things will be that a good one will find its way into the book. But again, until that time, I'm not in a position to care. What I have is not that book, his, but this one. This. So, to recap, don't give a damn about him. Who cares? Don't care about the subtleties of meaning that we don't have access to right here. So I appreciate you telling me that's wrong, let's try and wrestle it back over here. But in a systematic way, we can't really proceed like that. What I want to look at is the way the ideas function. This is my single favorite of the Analects. The Analects are a collection of works compiled mostly by his students. The master said, "Shen, my doctrine has one single thread running through it." Master Zheng Shen replied, "Indeed." Master Zheng Shen is really kind of a bootleg. Never disagree with the big guy. Right you are, boss. The master left. The other disciples asked, what did he mean? Master Zheng said, the doctrine of the master is loyalty and reciprocity, and that is all. I find this instructive. Now, I will just touch back. The humble man says something vague and expects everybody else to understand exactly what he means, and he leaves the room confident that, well, they'll figure it out. Doesn't seem humble to me. That's just a personal observation. The master in this case is Confucius. The master said, Shen, my doctrine has one single thread running through it. That single thread, loyalty and reciprocity. What does this do in practice? James.
Even though the statement might be vague, just go with it.
Go with it. Why?
Because asking too many questions is bad.
Asking too many questions is bad. That's interesting. Questions, bad. Now, immediately, I start to think in terms of, well, what kind of a culture doesn't like questions? What kind of a leader doesn't like questions? What's that? You're punching that a little hard.
Sovereignty.
Dictatorship.
Sovereignty.
It is, without getting, dictatorship's a big word. Let's pump the brakes a little on that. But I think it's fair to say that a social structure built on loyalty and reciprocity is not one that invites questions, is not one that invites dissent. Now, notice also a couple of things just about this little text as we have it. Number one, it's a dialogue. There are essentially three people speaking here. Big guy, middle guy, and then all the students. And they will represent one person. So it is a dialogue. There is nobody coming in and saying, there's no narrator necessarily. Aside from a few key things like saying that, it's really about the exchange of ideas. It's a dialogue. Dialogues are inherently, aside from those of us who, tend to babble on in our sleep, dialogues are meant to be had among people. You can't really have a dialogue by yourself unless you're a little, nuts. It's very social. It's all about people exchanging information. People meeting and trying to create some sort of meaning. I love the move where he just walks out. I love that he's got the confidence to just drop the mic and walk off the stage. Take it away, Jing Shen. You know what I mean. And everybody knows what he means. He doesn't need to explain. He doesn't need to elaborate. It's understood. It's kind of the way the mafia works, to be perfectly honest. They never come to you and say, I want you to kill James. They'll come to you and say, that James, be a shame, wouldn't it? And that's all you have to say. And then the next thing I hear, he got hit by a truck. Things happen. What are you going to do? This confidence betrays a certain authority, betrays a kind of power dynamic. Now, one of the things Laura told us about this man that is very important is he was, and here I'm going to get into a little biography, a politician. Did I spell that right? Probably not. I don't care. He worked in the government. He worked for the emperor. He was very well connected. He was a very learned man. He did spend a considerable chunk of his life journeying around the country and learning about it, so that when he got back to the capital, he was a very able advisor. He could speak with some authority about public affairs. Politicians work in the world of the social. Politicians work in the world of material fact, reality. They care about behavior. They care about you following the rules so that they don't have to spend a whole lot of time rewriting those rules. They care about order. Social order, perhaps. But you can see in this the kind of loyalty and reciprocity that runs governments. Now, loyalty and reciprocity is good. Loyalty and reciprocity is a good thing. The concept he's getting at here is if you demonstrate loyalty to the emperor, he will reciprocate with loyalty to you. That's great. All I have to do is be loyal to the emperor, and things are going to go good for me. There is a fail-safe baked into that, in that if the emperor is perhaps, hard to imagine this could ever happen, if the leader of your country happens to be, by some wild twist of the Electoral College, a total jackass, then he is not loyal to you. You don't owe him loyalty back. No reciprocity. You have that out. But in making that determination, in judging for yourself that the top guy is kind of a jackass, even asking the question, is he a jackass or is it just me? You know, am I the only one here? By asking the question, you're automatically being disloyal. You're automatically taking that step and breaking that contract that the emperor owes you loyalty reciprocally. So, the question I have to ask here can you ever break out of that? Certainly, in any well-structured civilization, and nobody for a minute would say that this is not a well-structured civilization. In any well-structured civilization, not everybody's happy. Statistically speaking, somebody is at the bottom of that pile. An elaborate superstructure of civilization, there's got to be people down on the bottom who just don't feel the benefits. Who maybe, if they had the opportunity to make a change or two, would even things out a little bit better from their perspective. What's their recourse? What can they do? Practically nothing. James ran out to the bathroom or something, but here is volunteering the word dictatorship starts to take on some traction. there is an inherent risk in any civilization that places this at its core, and then trusts that it is so embedded that it doesn't even have to be fully articulated, it's just known. So that one's my favorite. Anybody else? Suggestions, questions? Moving on. One of my favorite refrains, I'm sure you'll recall, is always look at beginnings and endings. Now, here, what we have is a compilation book, a list of sayings. And it's a little unclear how reliable the order can be. But still, just because it's my particular bailiwick, I like looking at, well, what's the very first thing in this book? You get the book, you flip it open, what's on the first page? The master said to learn something and then to put it into practice at the right time, is that not a joy? To have friends coming from afar, is that not a delight? Not to be upset when one's merits are ignored, is this not the mark of a gentleman? It's nice. What does anyone think about this?
It's like just manipulation all the way.
How so?
Well, the first one, anyone could, to learn something, putting into practice is a joy. To have friends come from afar could be a delight, half and half. And then not to be put upset when one's merits are ignored, is this not a gentleman? No. I would be upset. Like I think the majority would. So it's kind of like just something that's obvious, and then it kind of just flips it on you.
Well, it's hard to read stuff like this that is meant to be very general, because in the back of your head you're always saying, well, I don't know about that, Friends coming from afar, they're on my couch. What the hell do I want them there for?
Could be good or bad.
Yeah, the first day is great. After that, can't you leave? Laura.
This is like to have friends coming after you like open. Chinese language is very happy.
Yeah.
Because my friend far away look
Sure.
at me. I'm so happy. Yeah.
Especially, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that, way back when, afar might be just a few miles over that hill, but you don't get there terribly often. You're not moving around. There's no mass transit to get you there. So yeah, when you can see someone, that is a nice thing. But look at the underlying messages here. First of all, let's just take this one at a time. To learn something and then put it into practice at the right time. To learn something and put it into what? Practice. Practice. Another one of my little nervous tics is to constantly nag you guys into saying that, gee, literature is fun, but is it really worth anything? And my response there is always, yes, it is. We learn stuff that's valuable, and I'm constantly telling you, not only is it valuable and enriching your life type stuff, but valuable in the, if you learn to read and write well, you will get a better job because of it. It has a dollar value attached. into practice. Practical knowledge. Knowledge that is not necessarily, knowing about beauty, having, being in touch with yourself and your feelings. No! Knowledge that's valuable. Knowledge like, dare I say, accounting. For all you accounting majors out there. Accounting, management, finance, engineering, all of these have practical value. Practical in that you can learn to do something. You do it, and then that has a practical, measurable benefit for everybody around you. It's social. If I am, after reading a particular poem, if I am more in touch with my feelings, I'm sure you're happy for me, but it's really not going to change your life. Viviana, you would be happy for me if I got really in touch with who I am as a person deep inside.
Sure.
Yeah!
For you, yeah.
But realistically, your alarm's still going to go off at the same time every day, and, it's not going to be front of mind for the rest of your life. It has no practical value. My emotional state has zero practical value. That's not the knowledge he is talking about here. He wants knowledge that can be put into practice. To have friends coming from afar, is this not a joy? Friends coming from afar. Well, again, we're in the realm of the social. Friends coming from afar, someone perhaps you haven't seen in a little while. It's nice to see people. It's nice to welcome them. And when people come from out of town, you want to get along with them. You want to welcome them. I'm going to hit that word welcome a couple of times, or maybe I'll use a Greek word, xenia. Does anyone remember that? Xenia, from Greek. Hospitality. Welcome. Yeah. In the Greek world, roughly contemporaneous with this, just, the other side of the world, xenia was used as a way of taking a naturally, fairly, at the time, barbaric society, warlike society, and trying to impress upon them the value of just be nice at first. Try and get along. If somebody knocks on your door, you welcome them in. You don't automatically get defensive. You don't automatically be adversarial. You try to get along. Social. What does a politician want more than anything?
Social order.
Yeah, social order. He wants everybody just sort of going through life, not creating a lot of waves, not making a lot of noise. The last thing a politician wants to deal with is problems.
Revolution.
Yeah. When people start jostling around at one another, when they start fighting, when they start arguing even, or just getting pissed off at one another, that's when politicians have to get involved. And they don't want to get involved. They got enough to do. So it helps if you can take that value of xenia and implant it, hardwire it into your broader culture, and impress upon people very explicitly that their first instinct when someone comes up to them is to be friendly. Not to be upset when one's merits are ignored. This one is very difficult. You know, there's me and Jorgensen up for the same promotion. I work my butt off. Jorgensen gets the promotion. And you should hear what Jorgensen says about the boss in the men's room. Ugh. It is human nature to feel slighted from time to time. When you feel you are not getting recognition that you deserve, you resent it. You get angry. You let that resentment fester. And sooner or later, that will come out. No one swallows it forever. But here, I'm told that if I want to be a gentleman, if I want to be respected, if I want to be considered an aristocrat, a polite, refined human being, I need to ignore that. People will stomp on me, but I need to ignore it. Not mind at all. Go ahead, Jorgensen. Yes, the extra money, the better hours, the longer vacation, the parking spot, it's all yours. You deserve it, Jorgensen. My kids can go to college in the next life.
So convenient.
This is all a very one word you could use is materialist, but I'm not going to dwell on that. But it's very external. None of this naturally says that, you have to like it. It's encouraging you to, but it's really not concerned with that. It's about putting on that happy face, appearing to, going along with it. Above all, it is about maintaining the social comity, the social order that makes everything move along. You can have all of these feelings built up inside. No one's going to really effectively get you to believe that, oh, okay, well, Jorgensen got my promotion. Maybe next time for me, I don't know, but until the meantime, I'm just going to be down to my boots happy for him. That's unrealistic. That's not even really addressed here. But this is just saying, put on a happy face. External. James.
So did this work in the sense that it got enough people on board, whoever was outside of that, like outcast, kind of, they just conformed to it because they didn't want to be?
There are
Did it work?
several million words written about the historical ramifications of Confucianism down through the centuries. And I encourage you to go spend 3 to 4 years of your life reading all that. For our purposes, I don't think a firm answer on that question is achievable or even valid. It's a matter of some debate, as history always is. What's important to recognize is the pressure that this is trying to apply in this environment. This is highly centralized power structure in the Zhao dynasty, for which Confucius works, and he is seeing things starting to fray at the edges a little.
But didn't it start the word until after he died? Didn't they start using the Confucianism after?
Well, yeah, but he is generating these thoughts in an environment that is very socially fraught.
Yeah, can I say some one idea? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the best way difference between the Western and the Eastern. I think the last sentence for that. Before you said royalty. Why Chinese king always like the Confucius? Because he wants our like the country royalty king. Even though I did not very good job, you must royalty to me. So the country never like forever stay not fighting or anything else. So that one is like I think like we need to deep think about it. Why Chinese country different Western country? Chinese people always like no fighting, and like Western country said, if the king did not very good job, we need fighting. That is from this sentence I can think about that the thought. Yeah, no other. Sorry, myself.
No, it's all right. Yeah, I don't want to get too bogged down in the history of it. All I'm trying to show is the dynamics at play. Tracing the history of warfare in ancient China, and then you're into imperialism around the Greater Asian region. We can go on for quite a while. I'm not an expert. I don't want to dive in. What I'm just trying to impress upon you is, as with everything, what is this text trying to do? Given a certain environment, what is this text trying to do? In the beginning of this class, when we were talking about Homer and the hymn to Aten and a bunch of those things, I was trying to stress how the literature that we have, these works of literature, are actively trying to create a kind of social order. As we got into the plays, Medea and Aristophanes, and I think this is a continuation of it, we see an established social order and people trying to either reform or reinforce the essential structure. Literature can do all of these things. My contention is that it actually does this as a primary focus. You can call this stuff philosophy, you can call this stuff poetry in certain respects, but it is trying to do something very specific. It's trying to have an effect on the world around it. When the father is alive, watch the son's aspirations. When the father is dead, watch his son's actions. If 3 years later the son has not veered from the father's way, he may be called a dutiful son indeed. That's nice. What do we notice about this? He said as he walked in front of it for everybody to get pissed at. Well, it's always nice, tell me a story about a father and son. It sounds like a country western song. What's that?
When I read this, I thought it was like, you need a father figure, like father like son. So like, to my understanding, it's like to promote that you need a nuclear status, so that promote social order.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now you're getting at something there, but you sort of made the jump without pointing out what you're jumping over. Nuclear family, social order. What are you leaving out there? Other James. James 2, the sequel.
What you teach on to your children that it be in the same lines of, what Confucianism is trying to show, that it be passed on.
Yeah. What we're really dealing with here is the value of metaphor. They're talking about fathers and sons, but what is a reasonable interpretation of that? What could that be a metaphor for?
Kings and his people.
Kings and the people. The parent, the child. We're back with him to Aten, father of all. So it's not so much just, one dad and his cute little kid. It's the entire nation. So we're supposed to read into it and draw the message on a very local scale of the family, the nuclear family, and a very grand scale, meaning the entire civilization. And that's fine. But when you start making that jump and saying, okay, this isn't just one little family story, what does that really mean? Because sure, it's always inspiring to see a son following in his father's footsteps, saying, oh, gee, Senior was a really great guy, and Junior's, the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree, and all those little cliches. But on a metaphoric level, on a grander civilization-wide level, this starts to have consequences. Watch the son's aspirations. When the father is dead, watch the son's actions. Again, actions, we're having, and I erased it, another exterior perspective. They're not saying, what's going on inside the son. We don't really care. His thoughts, his feelings are his own business. What we care about are the actions because they have social utility. Those are real. Those are material. If 3 years later the son has not veered from the father's way, he may be called a dutiful son indeed. I do like how in this translation, inaccurate though it may be, they do lean on the word indeed a lot because it's got such attitude behind it. Indeed. It's just funny. I don't get out much, so, things like this amuse me. A dutiful son. That seems nice. Who wouldn't want to be known as a dutiful son? It's like being called a gentleman. You feel all proud, all spiffed up, all happy. Such approval. Dutiful. You do your duty. Duty is an outward behavior. Duty is a socially imposed behavior. You are expected to do your duty. This is all couched in very positive terms, very warm, sentimentalized terms of a father and son's relationship. But in reality, as we're talking about on a metaphorical level, this is about being dutiful as a subject of the leader, the emperor, the king, whatever you want to call him. But that handy little sentimentalization shifts it into a little bit more innocuous and easier to grasp zone where you can say, well, yeah, okay, it's nice when the son is polite and dutiful and follows his father's lead and can do so, can be expected to do so without too much correction, because he will have internalized the expectations. The expectations that his behavior needs to match a certain model being imposed by his society. These are fun. Let the Lord be a Lord, the subject, the Father a Father, the Son a Son. Nowhere in here does it say you got an opportunity to move on up. Nowhere is there social mobility even hinted at. Don't challenge the status quo. When good men have been running the country for 100 years, cruelty can be overcome and murder extirpated. That's an SAT word. I don't know who would translate that. You got me on that one. That's just a terrible word to use. Extirpated. But
Sounds like wiped out.
yeah, no, that's what it means. When good men have been running the country for 100 years, well, that's ambitious. And it seems to me that a saying like that gives politicians an awful lot of wiggle room. Because everybody who gets into a particular job can say, I'm great, but that guy before me in this job was a total disaster. I got to clean up his mess.
Sounds like Trump.
I'm not going there yet.
Draining the
They
swamp.
always can say, I could be doing so much more, but I gotta deal with everybody else. You don't have to expect me to deal with the murder rate or, people's cruelty. If I had 100 years, then I could do it. But right now, I'm just trying to make up for lost ground from the last guy. 100 years. Seems unlikely. It's a nice anodyne little aspiration. Okay, hold on. Another favorite. In an attempt to meditate, I once spent a whole day without food and a whole night without sleep. It was no use. It was better to study. I especially like this in the modern day when self-care, and it's kind of obnoxious to use the air quotes on that, but I'm going to use them anyway. Self-care is such a big thing these days. Meditation is a very real and popular thing. My wife tried it for a little while for some lower back pain, and it became this sort of, I'm not going to say joke, but it was some serious side-eye going on among me and my daughters whenever my wife would say, I have to go meditate upstairs in the bedroom, please be quiet for a little while. Because she would come down 45 minutes later and be very well rested, I will say that. Meditation is 5 minutes of thinking about nothing and then 40 minutes of a good snooze. She did better on certain things. She went on a retreat once, and it had a lot of benefits. I'm going to leave that where it is. Meditation. What do we know about meditation? At any point in history, what is meditation? What?
Yoga.
Huh? Yoga. Yeah, sort of, more or less. Slightly different traditions, but essentially, yeah. When you say yoga, I think of my wife's other thing when she did hot yoga, and that was just disgusting. Doing weird poses in a room that is 95 degrees and above. I used to do her laundry after. It was just awful. I still have nightmares about that. But anyway, the focus, the quiet reflection upon not really your inner thoughts, depends on the tradition, but it is very much a period of quiet reflection. I'll stick with that, because that's a safe term. In an attempt to meditate, I once spent a whole day without food and a whole night without sleep. Now, this is a special kind of meditation practiced in, it's what we call a renunciate tradition, where you're going to abjure, abstain, whatever, from fleshly concerns. And, sleep and food are two fairly universal fleshly concerns. Here, this is a part of the practice for that. He's saying that he spent an entire day without food and a whole night without sleep, presumably 24 hours flat out meditating. My wife couldn't make it 45 minutes. But an entire day reflecting quietly on your place in the universe, the nature of your soul, metaphysical, existential realities of all shapes and sizes. Or, if you're really good about it, achieving a state where you think about nothing at all. Pure emptiness. This is how I know that Confucius was a guy. It was no use. I did that for an entire day. It is pointless. It is better to study. Now I know, from a student's perspective, this isn't what your, this isn't your natural go-to for the alternative to meditation. It's like, oh, well, I should have studied. But think about what he is saying here. You're laughing. You've done this, I know. You find how unproductive, how impractical meditation is. It is of no use. Impractical. You find out how impractical it is you decide, that was stupid. I need to do something worthwhile with my time. I'm going to study. Probably not studying poetry and pretty stuff and frou-frou, silly stuff, but probably studying something that will have a practical utility, something social. Dwelling on the interior, dwelling on yourself alone is a dead end. Nothing fruitful will come from that. Focusing outward on the exterior, developing knowledge that can be used by society, by other people, that you can develop something for the entire culture, the entire civilization. That is better. Once again, exterior good, interior, what's the point? In my head, I always do imagine that moment when you guys are all told that you have to take a class on, ancient literature. That first voice in your head. I would lay down every dime I've ever made in my life, and it's approaching 3 figures, that your first reaction is, what's the point? In exactly that voice. Okay. Moving on. We gotta turn the page. The harping I am doing on, this is an unfortunate framing. Let me drop that down a little bit. All right. The harping I'm doing on the exterior nature of the analects and the social, practical, measurable, materialistic ideas behind it. Well, sometimes they can leave you a little cold. If everything inside you, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings of existential angst, if those are all pointless, and you're repeatedly told that they are pointless, what's your reaction to that?
Go more.
What's that?
Go more anxious.
Yeah, you're going to feel more anxious. Sometimes the worst thing you could do to somebody who's anxious is tell them, just calm down. Snap at it. Historically, I think it's fair to say, without getting into religion, which is always a touchy subject, historically we can say that human beings have a remarkable tendency to demand some attention to their interior selves. Some sense of recognition that we are not just eating, pooping, reproducing social machines. We're more than that. We have thoughts, we have feelings, we have hopes and dreams, we have ambitions, we have frustrations, we have rich inner lives that demand acknowledgement. And a strictly social understanding of man doesn't really go that far. There needs to be a counterbalance. And that's what we get in the Tao Te Ching. Again, written by someone I don't care at all about him. His name is Laotze, but today. The idea is that the idea is more important. If in a time of social anxiety, you are being told repeatedly, just snap out of it and do something useful, you're going to look for some way to calm yourself. Taoism does do that. Now, I will grant you, and we'll get to the word, the way is historically a wildly bad translation. The way, W-A-Y, that's what Tao gets translated as. And it has unleashed a fair number of jokes in the world. Nobody really knows what it means, but that is part of its function. And we'll get to that. Exterminate the sage, discard the wise, and the people will benefit 100-fold. Now, automatically, I personally will get my back up about that, because I, being the one standing up here with the, washable marker, I am in the position to be calling myself the wise and the sage. Sage means wise. Why they use it twice is kind of beyond me. Exterminate the sage, which seems extreme to me. Discard, I don't want to be discarded, the wise, and the people will benefit 100-fold. I will recall to you the final words of the last slide we saw. They're not really slides. Better to study. Exterminate the sage, discard the wise. Knowledge! In that academic way, that social utility-driven way, is stupid, is pointless, is only going to get in your way. Exterminate benevolence. Discard rectitude. And the people will again be filial. Now again, a lot of SAT words here. Rectitude is kind of like gentleman. It's being very stiff and proper. Benevolence, big word, but officially kindness, politeness, xenia in a way. And people will again be filial. Filial means a good child, loyal to your parent. Here, they're saying exterminate all of that, and people will again be filial on their own. Benevolence and rectitude are socially driven constructs. These ideas of behavior. Get rid of the social demand, and maybe people will just be good, generated out of themselves, instead of imposed on them from society. Exterminate ingenuity, discard profit, commies. And there will be no more thieves and bandits. This sounds a little pie in the sky, but sure. That idea is not foreign in today's world. We would all get along so much better if, money wasn't such a big thing. All of the social constructs around profit, capitalism, which was in a nascent form there, but it existed. All of that is just getting in the way of natural inner goodness. The social is impeding the interior. These three, being false adornments, are not enough, and the people must have something to which they can attach themselves. Must have something. The people. Not the government, the people. Individuals. Exhibit the unadorned and embrace the uncarved block. Have as little thought of self and as few desires as possible. This is a very famous phrase. You can find it on inspirational posters of sunsets, maybe sailboats off in the distance. It sounds really pretty. There is a fair critical literature out there trying to determine what exactly the uncarved block is, and we don't need to go into it too much. But I think what is obvious on the face of it is that an uncarved block is in a natural state. It has not been chipped or carved away at by social forces. It is itself independent of the exterior world. Have little thought of self and as few desires as possible. Little thought of self. This is what meditation is, or what it strives to be. To empty yourself, to deny and relinquish human desires, to become, the cliche is, to become one with nature. To no longer exist in a way. It's very difficult to not be a self, to not consider yourself as an individual first before you go into the social world. I will point out as well what, on a practical level, do you not see here that we saw in most of the Confucian Analects. It's not a complicated one. Yes, James?
Lack of self-cultivation.
Lack of self-cultivation.
Because in the other one, it was more like cultivating yourself. This one is just like, it's more like don't study, like, follow orders.
Yeah, it's not hard to see why college students really like this better.
I don't like this one actually.
Well, you're a good boy. Tell your mom. You're gonna go far in life. Lack of self-cultivation. That's very good. I'm gonna write that one down. The answer I was actually looking for, because I'm not as smart as you are, is quotation marks. Nobody's speaking in this. There is no conversation. It is not a dialogue, like so many of the others were.
This is kind of like the universe talking.
Yeah, exactly. This is supposed to be the universe talking. If, you know, in a more Western context, it's the voice of God saying, do all this.
But the other one made you think, like it made you ponder about the conversation. This one is just do, listen and do.
I mean, they both are trying to show power. Either you want to call it social,
Yeah.
right?
This is, in a way, a power over
Yeah,
yourself.
If you do this, you're gonna get this, and if you don't do this, you might have to face consequences.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's also shifting the power here. In Confucius, the power was always the master. And the master said something, and everybody had to go, what do you mean? What do you mean? Oh, well, I know what he meant. Of course I know what he meant. You meant this? Oh, that's what he meant. Of course. The power was very explicit. Here, they're telling you, get rid of the power. Overturn, well, let me qualify this. Ignore the power structure. They're dallying in a little hyperbole with the exterminate the sage, discard the wise. They're not actually saying that. You know, they're going to round up all the, you know, college professors and go shoot them in the head or anything in the field. I would hope they don't do that. But then again, maybe I could get a decent job then if I wasn't one of them. You know, free up the ranks a little. I'm kidding. I don't want to see senior professors shot. But they're saying ignore them. Ignore all those people in authority telling you what to think. Find it yourself. If you do all of this, you will benefit even more than if you listen to them. Find the answer within. Now, let me see. There are a couple of different topics I can go through, but I just want to touch on this, and I don't want to get too bogged down. A man is supple and weak when living, especially me, but hard and stiff when dead. Grass and trees are pliant and fragile when living, but dried and shriveled when dead. Thus, the hard and the strong are the comrades of death. The supple and the weak are the comrades of life. Therefore, a weapon that is strong will not vanquish. A tree that is strong will suffer the axe. The strong and big takes the lower position. The supple and weak takes the higher position. This has a lot to say about what Viviana just pointed at in the other one. Power.
When I read this, I thought of the era of ruling the fists is over. So like in today's society, we don't really fight anymore. We don't dispute things by fighting. More, or it's like verbal arguments.
Okay.
The intellect.
Okay. That's interesting. James 2.
More longevity
More longevity in what way?
in sense that those big and strong who take a lower position find themselves in constant conflict tends to like wear them down, shorten their lifespan, and those that are weak take a higher position, and that with avoiding of conflict and all, they live longer and so.
Okay. Yeah. Focus on the metaphors they're working with. I'm going to avoid the man is supple and weak when living because it hits too close to home for me. I don't do the joke. Grass and trees are pliant and fragile. Imagine, because nature imagery tends to abound in this stuff. Grass and trees are fragile. You ever seen grass in a stream or a river that's moving? You can see the grass bending. Grass is living. Grass is nature. And in the face of force of water flowing downstream, it will bend and thus can survive. If it's stiff and doesn't bend, what happens?
Cracks and breaks.
Cracks, breaks, dies. Taking that metaphor, what is the implication for how to behave in the world?
Just cool.
Adapt or die.
Yeah. Adapt. Be cool.
Go with the flow.
Go with the flow. Excellent extension of the metaphor, Viviana. Go with the flow. Don't
warring states.
Don't be stiff. No warring states. We'll get there. On an individual level, go with the flow. Don't fight. Don't object. What does that do on a miniature social level, though? Somebody who does not object but just goes with the flow? Generally, that's someone you like having around because, they don't object to anything. Yeah. You can do an awful lot with, as James just said, sheep. For the powerful, sheep are good. They listen to what you're going to say. In a time of crisis, as things are changing, and your government is not as strong as it was just a couple of years ago, and you're hearing about stuff happening out in the provinces that would never have happened just a couple of years ago, you can feel those walls closing in. Do you just say, no, that can't happen? Or you go with the flow. If you are in a job, and it's a large company, and they come and say, we know that part of your compensation has always been a very generous health plan, and we can no longer afford that. We're going to get rid of it, and we're going to let you have an allowance of one Band-Aid a month, and that's your health plan. You pay for everything else. Do you say, no, that is unacceptable? If it's a good job, maybe you go with the flow. All right. I'll go on the private market. I'll try and find my own insurance. You have a really good office, but suddenly somebody else wants it. I can fight or die on this hill. Or I'll just take the smaller office down next to the bathroom, and I'll know that I'll have that leverage over my boss at the end of the year when raises go around. Bend or stand firm? But it does allow the essential power structure to stand. It's not saying object to the power structure. It's saying just allow it to go about its business. In essence, the model of Taoism, as expressed here, is do what you have to do to get through the day. Let them do what they want. That's fine. You're going to change the life around me? Okay. Take away my health plan, take away my desk. Fine. It doesn't matter to me. I can be supple and bend with this reality because it means nothing to me. What is real to me is all immaterial. What is real to me is what's inside me. Because during the week, I'm doing the 9 to 5 and it's a drudge, and yeah, this is annoying and that is annoying, but I don't let it touch what's inside me. I don't let it bog me down. I tap into what is valuable in me, and I focus on that interiority, that interior reality that lets me just, all right, fine. Que sera, Hakuna Matata. I don't have this one written down, but in my book it's page 1349. Which is number, I believe that would be L7 or LXX in Roman numerals. It's going to be 70, I think. I'm not really sure. I didn't do well with Roman numerals when I was in second grade or whenever you're supposed to learn those stupid things. My words are very easy to understand and very easy to put into practice, yet no one in the world can understand them or put them into practice. Oh! Well, that clears that up. Words have an ancestor and affairs have a sovereign. It is because people are ignorant that they fail to understand me. Those who understand me are few. Those who imitate me are honored. Therefore the sage, while clad in homespun, which is like rough clothing, conceals on his person a priceless piece of jade. Now, I don't want to get into the bottom of this, but I want to focus just on those first two lines. My words are very easy to understand and very easy to put into practice, yet no one in the world can understand them or put them into practice. Seems logical, right?
Is it reverse psychology?
Reverse psychology, maybe.
It's like
A little psychological judo.
This whole thing has been like this reverse psychology.
It's a little slippery, and here it's pointing that out. But there is a purpose to it, and it goes back to why the way, while being a not particularly good translation, works.
I like it better than, like, Genesis and stuff. Like Genesis is like, you're dead now. Like you're going to hell. And this is kind of like
There's no heaven and hell. This is
but there's no.
None of these are. It's not an exact comparison because these are not religious texts. They are primarily philosophical texts realistically, they're social prescriptions.
Well, that shows you that they were around the same time. It shows you how much more advanced.
They were a more sophisticated culture by many standards at this point in history. With Confucianism, it was fairly easy to understand. It was attainable. You might disagree with certain points of it, but it wasn't complicated. You know, I took some time ripping through them, but there's no particularly sophisticated reading strategies I was playing off there. I'm just looking at it and seeing what I can make of it. That's deliberate. When they were written for many different people and intended to have a broad reach. Even that's a little bit complicated to say. They were written and used for many centuries, and to a degree still are, as an educational tool. Training young scholars, honestly, to go learn the basics of philosophy and learn how to manipulate language so that then they can go back in and become what? Politicians. And they can work in the government, which was a very large institution, and it was a pretty good job. And the government always needs people who can read and write. That's why colleges were born, honestly. But the Analects are not difficult reading. Conceptually, they're fairly front-facing and easy to grasp. They're written for people on the go. I have other stuff to do today. I don't have time to ponder something and try and tease out little tiny minutiae of meaning. I want to get it pretty quick so I can run out the door and get to work on time. Here, it's much more elliptical. It's much more vague. It's much more open to interpretation. These are fairly simple metaphors, but in many other respects, in many of the other writings, they get a little bit more sophisticated. The thoughts behind them can be very indistinct. So, when somebody says, my words are very easy to understand and very easy to put together, yet no one in the world can understand them or put them into practice, you're supposed to fight for it. You're supposed to spend time reading it over to yourself. It's supposed to not make, damn it, it went out again. It's supposed to not make sense. Because if it doesn't make sense, then you spend time trying to make sense of it. And you start repeating it over to yourself. And that action of dwelling and going over the same stuff over and over again, never quite getting anywhere, that action induces a kind of meditation because you're just going over stuff as if it were a chant. And B, it's not a bad analog for life itself. In a large, quasi-dictatorial society where you are expected to get up, do something that may or may not make any sense, something that perhaps makes you feel detached from everything, but it's your job, you're the worker bee, you do it, and then you go home and you go to sleep peacefully, quietly, productively.
But doesn't this passage contradict the whole thing?
What?
Like, the other one said, like, don't think at all. There's something you think, so doesn't it
Yeah. And it is the reflection on the contradictions that leads you to an immaterialist world. Confucianism wants you to know that there are certainties in this life, and you can find answers. And the answer is right in front of you. This is saying not so much. The answer isn't in front of you, it's within you. And within you is a universe so complicated and deep, you'll never reach the end of it. But whether or not it makes any sense, you make the journey. And thus, you find fulfillment on the inside while still maintaining your social obligations and just not getting caught up in them. The rat race. Who cares? There's a natural yin-yang quality going on here, where it's really easy to see how a Confucianist attitude in life can be very productive for you, can really help you, and can be a great tool for meeting life challenges. But at the same time, and in completely different ways, so can Taoism. So can the answers and the suggestions and the help that it provides move you closer to some amorphous goal. In reality, it is probably, I think we can all agree, maybe this is just me, I'll take it, I'm a middle of the road kind of guy. It's probably one tool is useful in certain circumstances, another useful in others. The confidence to say, my doctrine has one single thread walking through it, and then you walk out of the room, that confidence is the kind of confidence that Taoism says would probably get washed away. So you can see them working together in certain respects. And while, again, I don't want to dwell on it or get into it, while this has a certain utility for all of us to be able to see that, well, okay, in certain respects, when I have certain challenges, certain problems, if I were to apply this philosophy, that would help me. In other respects and other challenges, well, no, that one doesn't quite work. I'm going with this one. It's opposite. One or the other. It's good to have both of these in my tool belt. But now look back to this. Zhao Dynasty winding down, 200 years of increasing dissolution. The encroachment of chaos. This is a culture, this is a moment in history that needs multiple tools. One way isn't going to cut it. You need options, because when societies start to fray, history has shown things can be very unexpected, things can be at times quite violent, and almost always devastating. It makes sense that this age is feeling around, trying to develop, at times contradictory, but comprehensive tools for defending against the problem. Any questions on that? Okay.